Welcome to State and Fig, located in historic La Arcada Plaza in downtown Santa Barbara.
Our menu focuses on products that are raised in the state of California, inspired by the flavors of the Riviera.
And we are proud to be sponsoring this program.
Hello, I'm Twyla Kim. I've been an artist and hairstylist in Santa Barbara for 20 years. I personalize color, design, and precision haircuts for each individual at Sequel Salon in Montecito. I'm happy to be sponsoring Get Conscious Now.
I'm attorney Gregory Lowe. I will prepare your trust, bankruptcy, divorce, conservatorship, probate, evictions. All of this I can do at an affordable price and with caring. Thank you very much.
When I was growing up as a kid, I used to go around with him and watch him.
My mother and I both worked at Lowry Field.
To keep on doing this together.
Get Conscious Now is proud to be sponsored by American Riviera Bank. It's our bank, and we feel good about it.
Hello, I'm Patricia DiOrio, and this is Get Conscious Now. Welcome to the inspirational out-of-the-box talk show about what it means to live consciously in today's busy, chaotic world. Today's episode is on conscious religion. Now that may seem like an oxymoron, but actually it's not, and that's good news. In fact, living consciously in every aspect of life is very, very important for us as an evolving species. I'm joined today by my co-host, Stu Zimmerman, and we promise a wonderful, inspirational, and informative show today, so stay tuned. Hi, Stu.
Patricia.
Welcome.
Good to see you, sweetheart.
Good to
be
you,
here,
darling.
as
Yes,
always.
As always. Do you have some words of welcome for our viewers?
I do. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. If you're a first-timer here to our show, welcome to that as well. This is going to be a fantastic, as you mentioned, inspirational and even entertaining look at consciousness and religion. And if you've missed any of our other episodes, come to us on YouTube. We have our own YouTube channel. Just search for Get Conscious Now on YouTube, and friend us on Facebook to get some of the behind-the-scenes pictures and comments and what have you. And be a part of the family here, because you are, whether you know it or not anyway. So with that, let me bring the ball right back to Patricia and introduce our wonderful guest.
I will. Today's episode on conscious religion is especially meaningful for me. Having been raised strictly in the structure and dogma of the Catholic Church, I find the conversation of consciousness and organized religion very refreshing. I think it's important that I define what I mean here by consciousness. Consciousness to me is being awake and aware of our true identity as energy beings or spiritual beings in physical form, with this innate immeasurable power to create our reality. I'm convinced that if all of humanity were privy to this information and lived life accordingly, that we would have peace on the planet, and there would be happiness, joy, and prosperity abounding for everyone. I'm delighted today to be welcoming a man who is dedicated to living his life consciously in every way, but especially as a religious leader. He is Dr. Arthur Gross-Schaefer, who is the rabbi of a community shul in Montecito and Santa Barbara. And I had the opportunity to meet ahead of time with him and had a wonderful conversation and was blown away by all of his amazing credentials. So I'm just going to give you the broad brushstroke here. In addition to his rabbinical duties, he is also an attorney, a CPA, and a professor of business law and ethics at Loyola Marymount University in Santa Monica. And he is also the co-founder and president of the Avi Schaefer Fund in memory of his beloved son, Avi. And he aims to create nuanced and civil dialogue surrounding the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. On the lighter side, he is also a published author of a book entitled The Rabbi Wore Moccasins, a Murder Mystery. So we're going to hear all about that today. So Rabbi Arthur, just so wonderful to have you here today.
A pleasure, Patricia.
Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm honored.
Really a pleasure. So I'm going to kick it off with the first question here. As I mentioned, I was so impressed with all of your credentials, I guess, and it was after the fact that you became a rabbi. Why, after you had obviously a successful career in law and as a CPA, did you choose to have a religious vocation?
Oh boy, okay. I'll make this really quick. When I was 8 years old, I was working for John F. Kennedy's election. I was in charge of 2 precincts because we lived in a heavily Republican area. And my goal was to make the world a better place. That was my goal. And at that age, I decided I needed 3 skills: how to understand laws, make laws, money, and people. So I became a lawyer, CPA, and a social worker. And I started running campaigns.
At 8?
When I got a bit older, after I finished all those things. And then I found that my goal to make the world a better place was strange, because as a lawyer, my goal was to win for my client. As CPA, to make sure I did a good job for my clients. And I started to lose who I was. So I went to rabbinic school primarily to figure out who I wanted to be and what my values were. So there's an old joke, which is if I got a call to be religious, it was a collect call, because it was very expensive, but it really was to help me readjust my vision and who I wanted to be. That's why I went to rabbinic school.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Beautiful, Rabbi. Yeah, so to continue that thought, this program, Get Conscious Now, is about consciousness and how we can live a conscious life day to day. How do you define consciousness, and how do you bring that into your role as a rabbi?
Well, I don't try and separate my role as rabbi versus a human being. So I'm kind of all that at the same time. And I work in many areas with lawyers, CPAs, workplace, and so forth. So I would define it pretty much what Patricia did, but I would add that it's about understanding that every moment has opportunities to make judgments or not make judgments, to see the world as a place of blessings or of fear, and that I choose how to see that. So what I try and do is at every moment see an individual as someone who can teach me something, rather than someone to try and control or compete with, to see any event that I'm involved in as no matter how bad it is, how do I look for the blessings in that event? So it helps me, whether I'm a rabbi or not, and I do teach those things, but I think one teaches more by how they act than by just by words. I think teaching by example is how we really teach, not just by our words. So I try and do it on a regular basis, and I'm often successful and often not.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm fascinated with the Kabbalah, and I've never studied it, but I'd like to study it. And I know in every major religion there is that esoteric sect.
Right.
And Catholicism, we have the Jesuits, and in Islam we have the Sufis, and in Judaism is the Kabbalists. So would you share a little bit about Kabbalah and what it has in common with these other esoteric sects? What is the common ground?
How much time do we have for this? So first of all, the Kabbalah itself does not exist. There's no book called the Kabbalah.
Okay.
Lekabel, the Hebrew word, means to receive. So it's part of our spiritual tradition. There are many different books and also different paths. And every Kabbalist thinks they have the right path. So often we argue. There are some who wish to see Kabbalah or mysticism as a way to control reality. That's not how I see it. There are some who want to study Kabbalah or mysticism to have this one-to-one encounter with God. And while that's important, that can become very addictive. I want to have that spiritual high. It's a very personal one. I want us to use that to help make the world a better place. That's my ultimate goal. So it's to take the moment. In fact, it's like your concept of consciousness. It's to take how I walk through life and make it much more conscious. That I'm not here to make a lot of money, though money is important. I'm not here to control others, though power is important within reason. I'm here to understand that I'm to grow in that experience and help others grow. So mystical traditions are about, one, telling me that there are 4 worlds that coexist. So there's this world of reality, physical world, and the other 3 worlds above are less physical, much more spiritual. Mm-hmm. And they exist at the exact same time, and I'm part of those worlds at the exact same time. Mm-hmm. So we are conscious beings, much more spiritual than we are physical. As this table is much more full of air than it is physical, we are much more spiritual, but we forget that. Mm-hmm. So I want people to remember what they're doing, and that there are different energies, and how we look at those energies. For instance, when someone is raped, God forbid, and they are in a trauma where they constantly feel that sense of being violated, how do we move them to a place where, yes, it did happen, but does not define who you are? Mm-hmm. And our tradition, the mystical Kabbalistic tradition, talks about Chokhmah and Binah. Chokhmah, everything's coming at you, and you can't separate it. Binah is where you take that and you try and now put it into categories. Yes, that did happen to me, but it's not happening now. And so we have different ways of balancing how people act. And so Kabbalah, the study of it, for me, is about how do I walk through this life, see that it's real, it's important, and see the, if you will, the miracles all around me at all times. But I must choose to look for those angels and those miracles.
So would you say that that is part of the common ground with the Sufi and the Jesuits as well, or?
Well, you put Jesuits as a spiritual focus. I've only been with them for 37 years at Loyola Marymount.
Oh, okay, I guess you would know.
And I've never put Jesuits as in that same way. They're wonderful in many ways, but they're more in their heads, intellectual. And I need someone who also understands that heart has a lot of wisdom, and some do, but I would not say that I felt that particular focus there.
Well, I guess I include them there because having been raised Catholic, as I mentioned in my introduction, the Jesuit priests were always the ones that were the most liberal and left of center and more radical in their thinking than the dogma that we were introduced with. And also, although Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, I don't think he was a Jesuit. I think he was a Jesuit, wasn't he?
I don't know that one for sure.
Yeah, I think he might have been a Jesuit.
Yeah.
He's the one that coined the term, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Yeah. So that to me, is, and as I understand the Kabbalah, which is like a skosh, I thought that it was also really about helping us recognize that we are spirit.
I don't want to speak for the Jesuits. My experience is very liberal, yes. For instance, I went as a secret rabbi when I went to visit Nicaragua during the Reagan administration, because I was told when I was a rabbi I'd be seriously hurt. So I went actually as a Jesuit priest with a group of other Jesuits. That's my third murder mystery down the road.
Wow. But you actually did that.
I did.
Wow.
And they protected me. I didn't do Mass. They said, that you cannot do. But I said, that's fine with me because I wouldn't know the Latin. But the intellectual tradition of the Jesuits is what they're really known for primarily, but individual Jesuits within that. And their major spiritual quest is to go through the very stages that Jesus went through and to, in a sense, have each person experience those different stages, those different stations of the cross. So there are different deeply spiritual aspects of that. But when I put them with a Sufi or when I put them with a Kabbalist, I don't think they'd have the same language. I think the Sufis do. I think many within the Catholic tradition do. But my experience with the Jesuit tradition, but I have a lot of Jesuits you could bring on, so you could ask them. I don't want to speak for them.
And we probably should at some point, don't you think? Just to kind of complete the conversation.
To have it be fair, sure.
You know, so far, Rabbi, I've heard you talk a lot about choice, which really comes to the core of consciousness. And when I was born, I grew up, I was born to Jewish parents. They told me I'm Jewish. On some level, I didn't know that I had a choice to be Jewish or not. So I'm Jewish. How about you? Did you have like a conscious choice to be Jewish, or is this something that was basically inherited from your parents? And what are your thoughts about that?
Well, let's go back to Napoleon Bonaparte III. Prior to Napoleon in Europe, everyone got their rights based on their religion. So you really didn't have a choice, because there was no place you could go if you kind of left your religious tradition. True with Jews as well. Napoleon comes along, Enlightenment, everyone now got rights as French people, but not as their religious tradition. They had choice. So we are all right now, compared to what our ancestors were, we're all Catholics by choice or Jews by choice. We have that choice. And a lot of people may opt out. There are a lot of Catholics who no longer practice Catholicism, Jews, Buddhists, others. So everyone has that. On the other hand, children obviously want to follow what their parents did. At least they're good things. And very often, they pick their religion based on their particular parents' choice. Now, I love different religious traditions. My book, Rabbi War Moccasins, I worked with Native Americans and learned about their traditions. It was an amazing journey. I've worked with evangelicals, I've worked with Catholics, I've worked with Muslims, and I learned from those traditions. So the answer I would say to you is clearly I'm raised in a family environment. And being Jewish is not just a religion, it's more like a tribe, because you really kind of belong. You can be an atheist and be Jewish. I think it's hard to be an evangelical and be atheist. But you can within the Jewish tradition, because you're kind of more like a tribal system. But I did study other religious traditions, and I honor those. I do not believe that God only likes red roses. I don't think God only likes one religion. I think there are different religious paths to God, so I honor different religious traditions. But my family tradition feels the most safe for me, the most comfortable, and it makes sense. Can I argue and debate with it? Absolutely. But I like being Jewish. I'm actually really proud I'm Jewish. But I also honor people who are Catholics, who are Muslims. It's as long as they take it in a very sincere way and don't use it to try to impose it upon others. That's when I get a little bit upset. But if that's their journey, and it's to God, and to try to make the world a better place, I'm excited. I like that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So you were raised in that very strict Jewish tradition, right? But culturally and religiously. Right?
Well, Judaism is not so. We have three basic movements. I would say that the Orthodox is more strict. The conservative is more in the middle, and Reform is less strict. So the fact that I was in a town growing up where there may be a few Jewish families in the whole town, it wasn't exactly strict. In other words, we could do things, and our family made certain decisions. We decided not to eat non-kosher meat. We decided to do certain things. But it wasn't as strict as I think your experience was growing up as a Catholic. There wasn't a catechism. So for instance, on the Bible, was the Bible written by God, as an example? Orthodox Christian would say yes. Conservative would say, we're getting there, we're not sure. Yes, but Reform says primarily no. It was written by people who wanted to experience God using their own experience, and much of that was divine. But they also brought in their own biases, such as towards gays and lesbians.
Right.
Hence the Reform movement's the first one that had no problems. It took a while. But now we have gay and lesbian synagogues, not a major problem. Same went to first ordained women. And so we argue, but we argue out of love to understand our tradition.
So when was it that your spiritual awakening happened in that context? When was it that you really got that this table was air and that we're really more spiritual than we are human, but we have forgotten that? I mean, when was that spiritual awakening for you?
Actually, when I was studying to become a rabbi, we were told not to study Kabbalah. And so if someone tells me no, I go, why not?
Such a rebel.
And because the Reform movement for a long time was based on being rational. And mysticism, these things aren't rational, except they really are. And so it didn't make sense. In addition, I wanted something deeper than just the dogma, deeper than just these are the rules. And too many experiences suggested to me that there's other realities happening. And when I looked for more, I found more, as if the world opened up when you look for it. If I want to look for connections and gave my prayer to the world, suddenly those things happened. So I wanted more. I wanted to understand more. And that's when, basically, it was during rabbinic school.
Wow.
And only a small group of us did this. Very small group.
What would you say would be the percentage of rabbis, this is an off-the-chart kind of question, percentage of rabbis that, just a ballpark, that would be conscious?
I'm not going to even try that.
Okay.
I think that's very dangerous. I don't have information
Did you
to do
find that amongst your colleagues that there was, that you were looked at askant? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Askance.
Askance, yeah. Because of your interest in
mysticism
and spirituality, and did they judge you?
No, but the reason is because I have credentials in the other areas.
Right.
So I'm seen as, I think, the only rabbi in the world who is a lawyer, CPA rabbi. We have some rabbis who are lawyers, a lot of them, but I don't think all three. So because I have these connections in this world of reality, I'm okay.
There must be something to it.
Or they really don't know what I do in my community. Our community is a very spiritual based community, which is unusual. And we do meditation. When I do a healing circle for the high holidays, we'll have a circle of 200 people in a large circle. No other congregation, my knowledge, does that.
Wow.
I have all of the grandparents come up to bless us. I see them as our spiritual elders. I also invite up all the non-Jewish spouses to come up, and I thank them. I don't talk about conversion because that's not my goal. I thank them for being part of our community and helping to teach us and to be with us. Because again, I don't need conversion if I feel that everyone goes to heaven. Everyone. And that therefore, it's how you want to walk through this journey of life in this reality. If you want to be Jewish, great. If you want to be Catholic, great as well. I don't need everyone to believe the way I believe.
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah.
Yeah, you know, speaking of that, we know at Passover asks some 4 questions. And the first one is, why is this night different from all other nights? Let's pose that question to Judaism. How is Judaism different from all these other traditions?
Well, first of all, I am a little bit worried about that question because it starts to say we're better than somebody else.
So I said different, not better.
I understand. But a lot of times people say that the Jewish people are the chosen people. There's a Jewish joke that responds to that, which is, after everything we've gone through, God, please choose somebody else.
Right. I appreciate that one. Yes. Yes.
And also, I don't want to compare to say that we are better. Mm-hmm. And I'm just being very careful about that because I really honor other traditions.
Yes.
Some aspects that I really love about Judaism include the following. One, and by the way, we have Reform, Orthodox, Conservative, and we'll have different views. So whatever I say, another rabbi could give you a different view.
Understood. Fair
So,
enough.
So let me first take about talking to God. I like the fact that the word rabbi means teacher, not minister, not priest. You do not go through your rabbi to get to God. Mm. Matter of fact, anyone who has knowledge can lead a service, can do a wedding, can do a funeral. So that's why my primary goal is to teach and empower others. So therefore, the hierarchy is not there. Mm-hmm. So I like that. Mm-hmm. I like the fact that most of us, we question who wrote the Torah. And that gives us the freedom, again, to support gay and lesbian rights, women's rights. I think that is amazing. And I love that part as well. We're not stuck in the dogma. Now, the Orthodox may have other issues, but not where we come from. I also like some of our traditions about sin. We don't really use the word sin in the way it's used in other traditions. It's not this terrible thing. The actual interpretation of the word chet is that you missed the mark. Mm-hmm. Very different concept. Mm-hmm. So please get back on.
That's what sin means in archery.
Means.
Literally, archery.
Yes.
It's an archery
to
term.
miss the mark, to be without.
But it's not about you're bad. Right. It's not about all these judgment things, all this guilt stuff. I mean, we do have guilt, I understand that, but it's not the major thing. And then it gives us tools like when I'm in a conflict with someone, and you may ask this later on, but when I was addressing the young man who killed my son, and the normal reaction is revenge or anger, I really did not have that. Sorrow and loss tremendously. Mm-hmm. But I said to him in the courtroom, I go, I want you to have a good life, but I cannot forgive you today. I can't forgive you if you make a journey. And I gave him the 4 steps of our journey called teshuvah, repentance. And it's what I use for conflict resolution all the time when I work with lawyers or CPAs or others. The first step is an apology, where you actually say you're sorry without saying, I'm sorry, but. It means I'm really sorry. You take ownership for what you did, responsibility. Mm-hmm. 2 is to understand the extent of what you did. So I told him, I want you to listen to the funeral to understand what soul you destroyed. And then 3, you have to make restitution. And I said, any jail time or any financial restitution, that's separate. What I need for you, is that you silenced a voice. So you must find a way to give voice to the voice that you silenced. We have our fund. That's our way of doing it. Mm-hmm. You must find a way. And then 4, given the exact same circumstances, you will not drink and drive as you did. When you do those 4 steps, we will talk, and I'll be there for you. And so my tradition has helped me with these very difficult types of experiences. So I love our tradition.
And do you know that this young man, has he done that?
He's still in prison.
He's still in prison.
And I'm not sure. I know his father was very moved that I did that I did not come after. And the judge actually was blown away. He asked me to come into his chambers to say, no one's ever said that. It's always anger. We always have extra police because they always get attacked.
Sure.
And I said, that's my tradition. That's how I want to move through the world. By the way, I'd love that to happen with Israelis and Palestinians.
Yeah.
Those 4 steps would be very good.
Yeah.
And I'd like to do those someday.
Well, that's very moving. Yeah, beautiful. So you teach lawyers and CPAs, and I guess I would like to know if you include this concept of spirituality within your curriculum in some capacity.
This is fun. So I do this outside of teaching at Loyola. So every lawyer, every CPA, pretty much around the country has to have continuing education. And ethics has been assigned to them to become more ethical, which is actually not what they really did. What the states did, both lawyers and CPAs, is to say, look at these rules that we've set forth. If you break them, you can be sanctioned, disciplined. So it's not really about ethics. So I've been asked to teach ethics to lawyers, CPAs around the country. And I do something very different. I just don't teach the code at all. I get them for 8 hours. The first 4 hours about personal ethics. And it's not about the rules. So the first one, I make them aware of their motivations, why they do things. So I use Kohlberg's level of 6 levels of motivation. I want them to be aware if they do things just to avoid punishment, or because they get a benefit, or because they want to please others. So I get them to see that, first of all. I get them to become aware of their biases, number 2. I want them to see who they are. They have to write their eulogies to see where they are right now, honestly. And then I have them write mission statements, who they really want to be. And the first thing is, what is their heroic ambition? And it cannot be about making a lot of money or getting power. So I try and switch. I have them look at their core values. And then I talk about dealing with difficult people. When you have someone you don't like, you get all upset and so forth. How about if you look at them as maybe someone to bring you a message that you need to hear? And you move from a place of judgment and fear to a place of curiosity.
And gratitude.
And gratitude. Right. So I do all of those things, but in ways of saying these are to make you a more effective lawyer, more effective CPA. So the answer is yes.
Yes, but
I do it in a way that they can hear.
And so what do you notice there? Are there certain trends in terms of either what motivates them, these professionals, and or what kind of access do they really have to their heroic ambition if they've been living their lives possibly not so in touch with it?
So here's what I do that's fun. Can I do it with you for a second? Ready?
I'm ready.
I'm going to ask you 5.
All right, here we go.
I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have to give me a different answer. Ready?
Okay.
Now you'll probably blow it because you're not a lawyer, but okay, I'll tell you what lawyers happen. Okay, Stu, who are you?
I am a wonderful soul who's here to love life.
You're worthless. Okay.
Now you sound like my ex-wife.
Yeah, because a lawyer would tell me probably what law school he went to or what firm he's working with.
Okay.
I ask him the same question,
yes.
Right? He tells me what his specialty is. I ask him the same question. Then he'll go in to other things he does, but they're all on the very physical level.
Right. On the resume and the role that they play.
You got it. I can't get them to go to a deeper place.
Yes.
So then I teach them, in our tradition, there are actually 3 names. I've made it into 4 names. Everyone has 4 names. The name your parents give you, which includes their guilt, their expectations, all the gifts that they've given you. Mm-hmm. And the reason we have therapists, okay? Second name is how others see you. Male, female, maybe your race, religion, success, not success. And I say that most people live on those 2 levels, period. Third one is how you see yourself. When you're all alone, no one's there. Do you like who you are and what you're becoming? And the fourth one is how God, or Allah, or whatever term you wish to use, sees you and how you're using your time on earth. And so I take the answer I give them, and I then have them grade where the 5 answers were. And they're generally 1 and 2,
Right.
rarely 3 and 4.
Right.
And then I have them do it with each other, trying to give only 3 or 4. I try and force them. I only get them for a few hours.
Right.
But everyone the reviews are really very powerful. Some states do not like it because they want only the rules. As a matter of fact, I give in the first week of August a major paper on this topic to law professors, how I teach ethics. And I've also have a lot of research now to show, I hope, that teach them personal ethics first with some of these tools, that makes them want to be more ethical, and then they can listen to the codes better. Some will not like that, but that's my goal.
Well, I would think that, if you focus on personal ethics in the first part of what you teach, then that has to show up in the way they live their lives as an attorney or a CPA.
Right.
I mean, that's a given.
I'm going to have this tape now from your quote. I'll use it up in Seattle then. It'll be helpful.
Oh.
So is it my turn to ask a question?
It is your turn.
I can tell by the way
I
you're
can
looking
tell
at me,
you.
Patricia.
You
I know
can
that.
see
I know
that?
that look.
All right.
Let's talk about the Middle East
Yeah,
just briefly,
let's talk about the
because
Middle
it's top of mind right now. They're going through their, regular cycle, or so it unfortunately seems, of conflict. And what are your thoughts on how to bring consciousness, or what groups are doing there to help to break this ridiculous? I'm sorry for calling it ridiculous. That means I'm putting a judgment on it, but very deeply saddening continued conflict and war and violence with families and neighbors. What can they do, and what is being done?
So that's obviously a major question. Let me just also share that this morning, before I came, I get a call from my son Yoav, Avi's twin, who's in Jerusalem. And he just tells me, by the way, I'm fine, which always is a scary statement.
By the way.
So he was dropping someone else at the airport. And Israelis, because of these last few weeks, know where the bomb shelters are. Whenever they go to a restaurant, they have to check out where's the bomb shelter. And so forth. And the fact the government has bomb shelters is an amazing statement of trying to protect civilians, and that is not the case for the poor people in Gaza, who don't have places to run to. They don't have bomb shelters. It's very, very upsetting for all of us. And he had just been driving when he got the red alert that a missile was on its way. And there's no bomb shelters when you're driving. So he gets out of the car, you lay down. And so we talked about how he felt and so forth. And he was a former Israeli soldier, and yet he's very concerned to make sure that Israel does not extend what it has to do beyond just trying to protect Israelis. He's worried about what happens afterwards, the need to reconcile. And what we have done as a fund is we've created dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians, and we got that from our son Avi. He was only a freshman at Brown, and there was a Palestinian from Ramallah who hated Israelis. And it took a while, but they actually became friends. They disagreed, but they became friends. And during this time, we've been calling him to make sure he's okay. And actually, there were some problems that we helped him out with. So I see these groups. Beyond what we do, there's a group that we should never belong to. Strange group. It's only made up of parents who have lost children to the other side. So it's Israeli parents who have lost children because of a terrorist. It is Palestinian parents who have lost children because of an Israeli soldier. And these parents work together to understand each other, and they've called for peace. And they've called for people to be aware of each other and each other's stories. And there are not just one, but there's several groups that actually do that. What I think has happened, simplistically, but also very carefully by both sides, is they ignore the presence of the other. So it's mutual blindness. So the Israelis, as an example, while they know that they're Palestinians, they don't really understand, by and large, their view, their perspective, their story, their pain. Same thing with Palestinians. Most only see Israelis as soldiers or settlers. They don't see what their joy is. Until you see someone's joy, you really don't know them. My old statement is, an enemy is someone whose story you've not yet heard. So I think consciousness happens when we start to hear stories. But stories not as weapons. Sometimes we weaponize history and stories to show the other side's bad and we're good. You play that game, then we continue this whole thing. We have to break that down and create more stories of empathy and sympathy. And that's what we do, and that's what we think a lot of other groups will be doing. So that's a piece, important piece. And I want to say there's some Palestinians, Mahmoud Abbas as an example, who has expressed compassion and sympathy in a way that I did not expect. I think there's a voice there, and many other moderate voices. I've heard those from Israelis. There are those voices. We need to amplify those voices.
So you've written quite a white paper on spirituality in the workplace, which is wonderful to read it and to see all the effort you put into that. Can you share a little bit about that, bringing spirituality into the workplace when you have a workforce that's tremendously diverse and they don't really have that common ground?
And also the current Supreme Court cases trying to talk about religion and, in a sense, the ability to impose religion from the owners onto the employees and so forth.
Right.
Major problem.
Yeah.
So, first of all, we're going back to how I want to infuse these things with a business background. So I kind of sell it, honestly.
Speak into their listening, it says. That's what we say. Speak it into their listening.
Because I think it'll make them more efficient. I think it makes people happier. And I think, honestly, it makes them tie into what the people who manage and own really want. A workforce that understands there's a bigger vision than just someone who cleans the bathroom. What Lyndon Johnson once asked someone working at the Kennedy Center, who was cleaning the bathroom, "What are you doing?" And the guy responded, "I'm helping to launch our mission to Mars." And he's correct. And he was able to see that bigger picture. So in that article, I talk about that. I talk about making sure people see the bigger picture and that you have to honor them and help them see that. Because that's actually a very spiritual piece to it, which is that each of us contribute to the well-being of others and to the overall well-being of this planet. And it's not just, oh, you do this, you do that, you're a cog. Because then I feel like a cog. I want us to feel much, much broader. I talk about in that article, which I mentioned before, how to see each person you come in contact with as someone who has something to teach you about who you're becoming. And move from trying to judge or control, which a lot of managers think they have to control, or a lot of others who dislike people try and get away from that person. And that doesn't help anybody. And so on your better days, I'm not trying to say all the time, on your better days, I want you to see that person, someone who has something to teach you, and go in there with a sense of curiosity. And your energy will change, and just maybe, you can't control them, but I've seen it where if your energy changes, they feel that as well. I've also
because everything is energy.
It all is.
Yeah, and we're interconnected.
And we're all.
And it's what you're talking about, if I may interrupt you for 1 second,
Sure.
is the micro and the macro. And we're all interconnected in the web of life. If you look at it from that real cosmic perspective, and you can bring it right down to a corporation, a business, a family, we're all a part of that whole, and there is no separation.
I also teach my students to make a wellness kit for themselves before they go into the workplace, which is, what's your personal mission statement, what are your core values, but also what are the core values of where you work. Because those values, if you're not careful, become your values. And they're not always the values you want to become. Because the pressure to conform is very strong, and you spend more time at work than you do at home. You spend more time at work than you do sleeping. You spend more time at work than most of us do praying. And so they have to become aware, conscious of their environment. Can they make changes? Can they not? Why are they there? What they are doing? So this article has all those pieces into it. So I'm trying to empower employees to help make the experience one where they are living a much more conscious life. I use the word spiritual because conscious is one that most people don't fully understand.
Right.
Spiritual, they understand the word. They have no idea what it means, by the way, because everyone has different definitions.
Right.
Exactly.
That word is so far more acceptable. But that's what I'm trying to do in the workplace. I also try and get clergy to be more conscious as well. A lot of clergy are not that conscious. A lot of clergy like the power. They like the ones who tell everyone what to do. And they kind of lose their own bearings, who they are. So I try and get them to be much more conscious.
And ecumenically, I'm assuming.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Oh, yes.
So I've got a bigger question. A bigger
question
bigger,
than the Middle East?
Well, actually, in a way, yes. No judgment around it, but actually the bigger picture question, which may be the biggest one. Is God infinite? Is God truly infinite? And by that, I mean present in all things, in all moments, including us, no matter who we think we are?
Well, first of all, I cannot give you a definitive answer.
Okay.
What did you say?
I cannot give you a definitive answer. But I think it's a choice. I can choose to see God only on my side. Yay, God, for my religion. And God will take care of me and everybody else is an infidel or whatever term I want to use.
They're on their own.
They're on their own. Right. I can see God as only up there. I can see God as a clockmaker who made the clocks, us, and then walked away. Let's do what we want to do. So I need to choose for me a position that adds meaning to my life. Therefore, if I choose to see God in each person as a spiritual being, if I choose to see every event as having some part of divinity in it, my treatment of animals or the earth, then I think I live a richer life. So I have said, for me, the answer is yes, because I think it adds more meaning to my life. And if I'm wrong,
right.
Because I'm not living this life to get a ticket to get to the afterlife.
Right.
I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
I live this life to make this life meaningful for me. And when I die, God will take care of me. That's my basic view.
So I've got a follow-up question for you.
Of course.
And I got to say, this has been something that's been gnawing at me for roughly 50 years. And it was the story of Abraham and Isaac.
Yes.
The famous story of him willing to sacrifice his own flesh and blood. The person who he loved and adored unconditionally, possibly more than anybody, or as much as Sarah certainly, as much as life itself.
Yes.
And to prove his devotion to God, where he hears God's voice tell him, you must prepare a sacrifice of your son. And he does that, or is willing to go through all the steps to do that until that angel of mercy intervenes.
Right.
I have found that story so troubling in terms of the notion that if there is a God that's infinite, how would we prove our devotion to that in that way? In that way. And it's, my son, God bless my son Nathan, when I relayed that story to him, kind of teaching him a little bit of Sunday school on my own, he says, Daddy, I know you like God. I know you like God, Daddy. And if God told you to kill me, would you? And I gave him I said, no, absolutely not, for two reasons. One is because the God that I'm aware of creates life. And yes, death is part of it, but it affirms life, and it really wants no harm. It wants us to grow and abundant in its own image. And secondly, if God is as powerful as rumor has it, he doesn't need me to kill you. He could do it himself.
Boom, yes.
So I'm out of it. And so I just have thought that story alone could give, if Abraham is willing to kill his own flesh and blood in the name of God, doesn't that give anybody the right to kill anybody else with that same rationale in the name of God?
Yes. And that's why, of all the parts of the Torah that there are out there, a lot of parts, the one with the most commentaries is that one. The rabbis have problems with it, major problems with it, major problems with it. So the group of rabbis that I like say the following. This was a test of Abraham, and Abraham failed it. Abraham should have said to God, over my dead body, would I let you kill him? Would I kill my son? That's what Abraham should have said. And God said, okay, you really want to see? I want to see if you really go through with it. And when Abraham's about to, God says, no, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm stopping you. And that's where the angel comes out. So I think Abraham blew it. Now Rabbi Woody Allen says it better. That story only proves that someone with a strong, deep voice can get people to do the stupidest thing.
Yeah.
And so,
right on.
So when I teach that one every year, I say this is a story for me of the dangers of being a fundamentalist. The dangers of saying that you know what God wants. How dare you say that? And that gives you the right to kill others. To say right now, if you're a Christian, I can kill you. To say if you are whatever other religion I don't like, I can kill you. No. God wants to reaffirm life. I think you are correct. Totally.
There you go. You've got it handled after 50 years.
That was easy.
Yeah, I was almost be willing to put my place here, but
and you gave Nathan the right counsel. Wow, this was wonderful. And so we're going to close this interview with a pearl of wisdom from you. Dr. Arthur Gross-Schaefer, Rabbi.
Esquire, CPA.
Yes, if you could give a pearl of wisdom, and that's your camera over there, so you'll be addressing our audience. If you could give them a pearl of wisdom that you would like them to take away from this show, what would that be?
I'm gonna ask you to visit my campus, Loyola Marymount University. The university made a garden of peace in the campus for my son Avi. He wasn't a student there. And we picked out quotes from different religious traditions to put on stones. It's a great place to meditate. You should come to the garden. One of my favorite ones, based on what we've been talking about, is by Rumi, Islamic tradition. Beyond rightness and wrongness, there's a field where I will meet you. We need to find those fields to meet each other. Beautiful. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
It was
Rabbi.
a very
Beautiful.
wonderful, moving show. Just
Thank
really
you.
loved having you on. You're a wonderful man.
Thank you.
Yes.
The community is blessed to have you.
Thank you.
Now it's time to hear from the wittiest member of our team here at Get Conscious Now, and that is Stu Zimmerman. Stu, take it away. Stu's views.
Thank you, Patricia.
You're welcome.
I'll try to live up to that.
Okay, I'm sure you will.
Here we
You
go.
always do.
Thanks. All right, everyone. For this episode of Stu's Views, I want to invite in the highest possible, grandest vision for what this world could possibly be. And I'm going to go back to this story about this garden that supposedly existed on this planet, literally as heaven on earth, where nobody lacked for anything. There was more than enough abundance. They were living in the garden, running around naked. It sounded like one of my parties once in a while we have up there. Maybe you ought to be invited sometime. But, you know, as I start to really conjure up and really tune into what is this notion of what the garden could be like, because if there's any possibility of living a day or a life on this earth, a whole life actually, of peace, prosperity, fun, joy, connection, all of that, you know what? I'm volunteering for it, and maybe you are too. Okay, so we're talking about a garden, and I've noticed that the garden any garden requires attention. So as I'm starting to pay attention to this garden here, what would it consist of? You know, like tending to the garden? Well, consider that tending comes in 3 phases. The first phase would be pre-tending. Okay, that's where we get all the weeds and all the riffraff out and clear out the garden and all of these like limiting beliefs of we're not good enough, we're not worthy, we're not, you know, whatever we are, you know, there's something wrong with us, we're not lovable, we don't deserve it. And just kind of weed out some of the riffraff and really take in the notion that we are part of this cosmic, conscious energy wave field that appears to be solid, but in fact is not. And then we are interconnected. Okay, we could start with that as part of tending to this garden here. And part of it is to stop pretending. Stop pretending that we are separate from that which is infinite. Stop pretending that we're not worthy of something that is inherently true according to science, that we are interconnected as these energy waves here, and matter cannot be created or destroyed. And that we're so much more than whatever we think our bodies are, or even our thoughts are. So that's the pretending phase. And we go from pretending to the second phase of intending. And by intending, of course, I'm talking about intention. And really making a conscious choice, and we talked about this with Rabbi Arthur earlier today, in the rest of our program with Patricia as well, and really make the intention that if there's any possibility that I can be a more loving being, if there's any possibility that there is some aspect of what I could consider the divine to actually be living in this particular meat suit, in this particular skin and bones, then I intend for that to be the case. And I'm inviting you to make that intention as well, and to really allow in all of this greater energy and this beauty that surrounds us in every possible direction. Because if we look around, whether it's a sunset or some other aspect of nature, or looking into children's eyes, or watching House of Cards, or whatever it is that really gets us going in life, listening to music that turns us on and makes us start dancing, there's going to be beauty in like every direction. Can we let that in and have that be part of our intending so that we're welling up and filling up with this juicy love, joy, or perhaps it's just simple resting in some peace. And wouldn't that be a relief? And so we can go from pretending and intending to extending, where we extend ourselves and we are these conduits of light and love and beauty and harmony and gratitude, and just extend that to others, and in our words and in our smiles and in our gestures and in our action steps. And that grounds things, that makes it real, that makes it in this dimension and not just a wishful thought somewhere else. And can we do that? And yeah, all of a sudden we go from extending and we're back to pretending. And all of a sudden I forgot who I am and I'm back in this little guy here and not enough money and not enough this and not enough that. And go through the cycle again. And we quit the pretending and invite in the intending and breathe it in and extend and breathe it out and share it with everybody else. And if we are all able to do that together, I actually think that this garden is more than just a long shot. There may actually be something that we can ground. So that's it for this Stu's Views. Pretend, intend, extend the garden. And with that, it's time for quantum quotes. And Patricia is going to wow us as usual with another wisdom.
Thank you, Stu. That was an excellent share. So today's quote is one that comforts me and inspires me to really be persistent and passionate about what I call the consciousness conversation. And you've probably heard this quote before. It's from the great German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, who lived in the 1800s and influenced many of today's greatest thinkers like Einstein and Freud and Carl Jung and Tolstoy, and even more recently, Joseph Campbell, amongst others. Here's the quote: "All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. And third, it is accepted as being self-evident." I love that. So I'll give you an example. Before Columbus discovered America, people thought the world was flat. That was the paradigm of the day. And then after that, everything changed. And in the time of Galileo, he knew that the sun was the center of the solar system, not the earth, but it was such an anathema at the time, and I believe it was the church that opposed it, that he was actually jailed until he died in his home for speaking what they thought was a lie. And Copernicus, one of his proteges, was much smarter about it. He wrote a book explaining the scientific facts about the sun being the center of the solar system. But he waited until he was on his deathbed and he handed it to one of his proteges. And it was after Copernicus died that that paradigm shifted, that the sun is the center of our solar system. So several years ago, 1996, when I decided to pursue this conversation in the media here on Channel 17, I started a show called The Paradigm Shift. And I knew I was in trouble when people come up to me and say, "What's a paradigm?" But I thought, no, I'm just going to move right ahead, because what I was talking about with naming the show The Paradigm Shift is that there is a huge paradigm that's shifting today on the planet. And that is the paradigm that we are not merely human beings having an occasional thought, spiritual thought, whatever. That we are actually spiritual beings, as Pierre Teilhard de Chardin told us. That we are innately and immeasurably powerful in our ability to create our reality, which science tells us we're doing all the time with our thoughts, with our perceptions, with our beliefs, with our emotions, with our words, with our feelings. We're creators of our world personally and collectively. And Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was defrocked, it's called, I believe the term, by the Catholic Church for having the audacity to suggest that we were spirit, that we were of God, that we were not separate from God, that God was not up there sitting on a throne calling the shots, that we were of that. We are made of the same stuff. And I look at God personally, metaphorically, as the sun, the source of all life. And we're the sunbeams that come from the sun. We're made of the same stuff. You can't have a sunbeam separate from the sun and have it shine. So I've been pretty much of a wild woman about this conversation, and people that know me personally and professionally and socially know that this has been my mantra for a very, very long time. And it will continue to be my mantra for a very, very long time. And why I'm doing this show and why I'm working with others like Stu and Rabbi Arthur, who is with us today, and this wonderful crew that comes together on a regular basis to do this, volunteering our time to do this, is because we really want to see the media be the vehicle for this information to get out to the masses. Because when that happens, when people can come into alignment with this conversation and accept it as truth, as self-evident, it becomes self-evident. And certainly this conversation with the New Age in the 70s and the 80s and all the stuff around that, it was ridiculed, and it still is. And it was violently opposed, certainly by organized religion. And now I do believe, because we are an evolving species, that it is becoming self-evident that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And when that happens, we create heaven on earth. I think that's entirely possible. And to kind of take it from Stu's garden conversation, this is heaven. Heaven is not up there somewhere. We're creating it. And this is also hell when we're ignorant of that fact. So I ask you to consider this quote again and realize that we are all a part of bringing this into its self-evidence. So thank you, and I appreciate that opportunity to share. Are we ready to wrap it up?
We certainly are, Patricia. Great
Okay.
quote.
Thank you.
And analysis.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
So thank you both. Thank you everyone for watching our show tonight. And remember to go on YouTube to catch the rest of the shows that we've done. I think this is our, 14th show?
Something like that, 14
Yeah.
or 15.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So until we meet again,
Yes.
remember,
Get
conscious now.
Welcome to State and Fig, located in historic La Arcada Plaza in downtown Santa Barbara.
Our menu focuses on products that are raised in the state of California, inspired by the flavors of the Riviera.
And we are proud to be sponsoring this program.
Hello, I'm Twyla Kim. I've been an artist and hairstylist in Santa Barbara for 20 years. I personalize color, design, and precision haircuts for each individual at Sequel Salon in Montecito. I'm happy to be sponsoring Get Conscious Now.
I'm attorney Gregory Lowe. I will prepare your trust, bankruptcy, divorce, conservatorship, probate, evictions. All of this I can do at an affordable price and with caring. Thank you very much.
When I was growing up as a kid, I used to go around with him and watch him.
My mother and I both worked at Lowry Field.
To keep on doing this together.
Get Conscious Now is proud to be sponsored by American Riviera Bank. It's our bank, and we feel good about it.